Morning. Am I on? I just want to make sure because last time I tried it, last time I spoke, there it is. Last time I spoke, it kept going in and out. Simply, today's message is called Leading During Conflict. Before I get into that, and it's out of Numbers 12, I wanted to first take this time to say thank you. For those of you who were involved last week in the pounding, not the stoning of Stephen. I actually just came up with that right now. But I just wanted to tell you thank you and how grateful I am for your amazing generosity. I told Kim Wilson on Wednesday that it was as if some of you saw my grocery list or were in my head and knew what I was thinking that I was eventually needing to get. So I wanted to tell you thank you and how grateful I am. This is the second time I've already been impressed by Bethsaida. The first time I was impressed, I told people when we were getting ready for camp, people showed up early before we left for camp. Places I've come from before, people come on time or they're late. So that was the first time that I was impressed, but this time I'm even more impressed and thankful and grateful. But Numbers 12, leading during conflict. There are a lot of things going on in the world today, especially over the last 3 weeks, in the United States as well as abroad. We have conflict, we have controversies, we have war, we have violence, etc. And as Christians, what is our response to be? What are we supposed to do? Well, ultimately, I do truly believe that as Christians, we are to lead the way. But how? How are we supposed to do that? Well, we actually see Moses, one of the greatest leaders of all time, and how he handled conflict. And not conflict that was not only around him, but conflict that hit home, that hit very close to home. Numbers 12, where this falls, is in the book of Numbers. Most people think of Numbers because it has a lot of numbers in it. It's a time for a census, but we have many different areas in Numbers where we see great stories of Moses leading the nation of Israel. Numbers 12 falls shortly after God provided manna and quail for the nation of Israel. Of course, that coming after their many times of grumbling and struggling. And it falls right before the spies are sent into the land of Canaan, aka the Promised Land. So this is actually a pivotal point in the time of Israel, in the nation of Israel. So let's look in Numbers 12. I will be reading out of the ESV, but we're going to read through this whole chapter. It's a short chapter with 16 verses. So here we go, starting in verse 1. Miriam and Aaron spoke against Moses because of the Cushite woman whom he had married, for he had married a Cushite woman. And they said, "Has the Lord indeed spoken only through Moses? Has he not spoken through us also?" And the Lord heard it. Now the man was very meek, more than all the people who were on the face of the earth. And suddenly the Lord said to Moses and Miriam, "Come out, you three, to the tent of meeting." And the three of them came out. And the Lord came down in a pillar of cloud and stood at the entrance of the tent and called Aaron and Miriam, and they both came forward. And he said, "Hear my words. If there is a prophet among you, I, the Lord, make myself known to him in a vision. I speak with him in a dream. But not so with my servant Moses. He is faithful in all my house. With him I speak mouth to mouth, clearly and not in riddles, and he beholds the form of the Lord. Why then were you not afraid to speak against my servant Moses?" And the anger of the Lord was kindled against them, and he departed. When the cloud removed from over, Miriam was leprous like snow, and Aaron turned toward Miriam, and behold, she was leprous. And Aaron said to Moses, "O my Lord, do not punish us because we have done foolishly and have sinned. Let me not be as one dead, whose flesh is half eaten away when he comes out of his mother's womb." And Moses cried to the Lord, "O God, please heal her, please." But the Lord to Moses, if her father had but spit in her face, should she not be shamed 7 days? Let her be shut outside the camp 7 days, and after that she may be brought in again. So Miriam was shut outside the camp 7 days, and the people did not set out on the march till Miriam was brought in again. And after that, the people set out from Hazeroth and camped in the wilderness of Paran. Pray with me. I come to you this morning humbly as your servant to speak your word. God, I thank you for giving all of us a new day of life, God, to live for you. God, I pray that as we look at this chapter of Numbers 12, God, that we would hear what you have to say to each one of us, God, and respond in the way that you are moving us. God, I pray over our time together. I pray this in your name. Amen. Verse 1 and 2. I'm going to read over this one more time. Miriam and Aaron spoke against Moses because of the Cushite woman, whom he had married, for he had married a Cushite woman. And they said, has he spoken only through Moses? Has he not spoken through us also? And the Lord heard it. So before I get into understanding how do we lead during conflict, we must understand possibilities of things that a leader may face. A leader will face criticism. Criticism from people who are not close to you, people you don't know. Also criticism from those who are the closest to you. Here, Moses was criticized by his own family, his brother and his sister. We know Miriam is one, his sister, who followed his basket as it was sent down the Nile River. Aaron is the high priest of the nation of Israel. And we know that Moses was one of the greatest leaders to ever exist. But the thing is, if you read throughout his life in the Old Testament, he never criticism as the leader or constantly see where the people are grumbling and complaining, and they come before Moses and a lot of times question, criticize his leadership. But not only will a leader face criticism, criticism can come in the form of a pretense. So what is a pretense? Basically, it's a false allegation. It's a false allegation brought up against a leader where it's not the main issue. Miriam and Aaron spoke against Moses under a pretense. They made an allegation about Moses, but it was not the real issue. If that was the real issue, more time would have been spent on that. They complained about Moses' wife, who was a Cushite woman. We don't know for sure what the issue was because the text does not tell us, and that's because it's not the point. That is not the importance of this text. But some people, I'm just going to give some information, some people, some scholars believe that this could be potentially a race issue because Cushite, basically coming down to the understanding of what a Cushite is actually an Ethiopian. Ethiopia is south of Egypt. So some people have been a race issue. Some people believe this could be Moses' second wife, either that he had two wives or this was his second wife after his wife Zipporah died. But most scholars believe that this is not Zipporah because whenever she's mentioned in the Bible, it says that she is from Midian. So, we don't know for sure, but the thing is, the issue, again, is not stated because it is not the main issue here. The real issue here is Miriam and Aaron's pride and the desire for the authority that Moses was specifically given. It was jealousy of Moses' leadership. And all we know is that Miriam and Aaron, that issue was that they brought before about Moses' wife, was a way to try and undermine Moses' leadership. The thing, we do this. Moses is supposed to be this example of Jesus in the Old Testament. He is supposed to be this image. And the thing is, sometimes we do this in our own lives. How we come before the Lord and think, you know what, God, I think I know better than you. God, you're leading me this way. I think this way is better. God, you don't know what you're doing. And we may even use it pretense against God, using something that's not the real issue, where it is most likely lack of faith and lack of trust. And that's what the issue is, not a pretense, not another false allegation. So as we go through our lives, we will see times where people will use pretenses, and even we might find ourselves using them. And many people try to explain why the world is in the mess that it is in today. But many of them are in forms of pretenses and never really explain the real issue. They never get down to the root of the problem, or they never really explain the issue. But as Christians, as followers of God, we know that the main reason, the real issue of why the world is in the mess it is in today, is because the sin of the human heart. These things that have happened over the last few days, over the last few weeks, have to do with sin. It has to do with the sin of the human heart. We are corrupted by sin. And until we get that right, things will never be right. Only the gospel can do that. It's not going to be another leader. It's not going to be a simple fix. You can't simply just put God into your life and think that it's going to work. It can't. The gospel changes lives, and that is what fixes it. So Miriam and Aaron spoke against Moses, and they didn't even think twice about it. This is not only their brother, it is their supreme authority, who is specifically placed by God. And Moses was given this by God. And I believe that we need to be careful sometimes about how we speak about our leaders. And this is also a reminder to myself, because I am just as guilty as anyone. But we see in Romans 13:1 that says, "Let every person be subject to the governing authorities, for there is no authority except from God, and those that exist have been instituted by God." That is from the Apostle Paul. Leaders are in their place of leadership because God has placed them there, whether we like it or not. And let me tell you this, yes, there will be times where we disagree with leaders, and no, they are not Moses or Jesus with supreme authority. But to speak ill will about a leader is a sin. It is. And again, I have been guilty of this. And we have to remember that God hears us, even if we are behind closed doors, even if we think we are private, even if we have not said it to anyone else. God hears and God sees. And the thing is, our ultimate insubordination, what is wrong with Moses, Aaron, and Miriam here, is that their ultimate insubordination, not only in defiance of authority, against God. It's against God. So moving on. So those are some things that you may face, but what are we supposed to do? How are we supposed to lead during conflict? And I'm in verse 3 for a little while, but it's very important. Verse 3 says this, "Now the man Moses was very meek, more than all people who were on the face of the earth." I always find it interesting when I've read this, because do you know who wrote the book of Numbers? It was Moses. Now, some people believe this may have been added afterwards, but it's here for a reason. It's here for importance. It's an odd place for this to fall in this text, but it's here because it's important, and we need to understand that. So, your version of the Bible and my version that I read may use the word meek, or it may even use the word humble. And I want to tell you, a leader is humble. The Hebrew word used here is the word anav, A-N-A-V, which basically down to its root means humble. Anav is a Hebrew word used 26 different variations, and there's a Greek word that is similar to that is tapenos, and is used 33 times in the New Testament. But the thing is, what does humble mean? We have to understand that if we are to be humble, and ultimately I think a leader, all must be humble, During our time at camp, one of the things that we were studying was on the King Josiah, and we understood that God blessed him and allowed him to escape the wrath of God because he was humble. But what does it mean to be humble? I'll give you an etymology of the word humble. But it comes from a sermon by Jonathan Stockstill, out of a pastor of Bethany Church in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. I've been following them this week, and they've actually had some interesting things as far as what they've been doing in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. They were hit fairly hard by that. But a couple weeks ago, he had a sermon on Moses called Moses Building a Church That Hosts the Presence of God. And he expounded on the word humble. This is what he said. It comes from the Latin word hume, where we get the word humus. Now, this is not hummus as in what we eat, the dish we eat. This is humus. And if you are a farmer, if you are a planter, you may understand and know what humus is. Humus is actually the organic part of dirt that comes from decomposed leaves, vegetable and animal matter. It is the healthiest part of dirt, and it is the fertility of the earth. And it basically means dirt. From humus, we get the word human. Again, dirt. And isn't God so amazing? He piled some dirt together and breathed in it, and it became self-aware, feeling, hungry, relational, knowing. God's a genius. And we rise from the dust, and go back to the dust. We have to remember that we are dust. Everybody is dying. And you know how many generations have gone before us? Dust, dust. We are dust. So humus. From the same word hume, you get human. Then comes the word humble. That's where we get the word humble. So basically, we are humble, humus, humans. That's what we are. Humble, humus, humans. And the quicker we realize it doesn't matter how great of a castle you build for a legacy, it is a sandcastle. The quicker you realize you are from dirt and you will go to dirt. You realize to Him be all the glory, not to us be all the glory, but to Him be all the glory. And you start to fall on your face and say, God, my life is worth nothing. Solomon realized in Ecclesiastes that life, it is all meaningless because he got the wisdom to realize that I'm coming from dirt and I'm going back to dirt. We say, what is it, God? What do you want? Moses was more humble than any man on the earth. You can't have pride. So, humble, in a way, means you must be like dirt. Remembering where you came from. Remembering how God created you and who you are. So let me give you a little story of a understanding of, to me, when I think humble. For 3 summers, I worked at a camp in North Carolina west of Winston-Salem in Clemmons, North Carolina, called Marywood Christian Camp. We had an auditorium that was not much bigger than this sanctuary. Where I'm standing, we had a stage that was a little bit shorter than this, about the same size. Over here on the left, we had our piano. We had doors in the back, and we had over here, right about where this stained glass window is, we had a double set of doors. One day after camp, after we had had a long day, our program director by the name of Dave Key, one of my great friends, he's like, you know what, guys, we have a lot we need to work on, but I'm going to give you the rest of the day off. I'm going to let y'all rest. I'm going to let you recuperate. I'll let you go out to town and go get something to eat and hang out together and just, have some time together, but not thinking about work. Well, my first summer, I didn't have my car. Sometimes I would just sit around at camp. There were a lot of things going on that summer for me, and I would just go and ride our biking trails, go shoot archery, play a little bit on the rock wall, getting my workout in. And so one day, if you don't know, some of you know, I play piano. Well, we had been worshiping that week, and I just got to a point where I was like, God, think I need to have a time of worship. So I came to the sanctuary. I came in through the side door and came up and just started playing piano, playing loud, singing loud. Didn't think anything about it. Didn't look around. And as I got up and left, I looked over to my right. And right about here, my boss, my program director, was sleeping on the stage. He had paper around him. He had games that were for an activity. He had a whiteboard where he had been drawing. It's actually getting me a little upset right now thinking about it. He had spent the rest of his day working on what we need to do. And he was willing, and he didn't have to give us the rest of the day off so that we could enjoy it while he worked. And then later that day, I went up to him, and I was crying at that moment because it just convicted me. And I said, Dave, I'm sorry, because I had thought I had woken him up. It's surprising I didn't. But I was just convicted by the fact that someone would do that for us. And he's like, Stephen, I did that for y'all, and I'm not looking for the credit. I'm not looking to be praised for that and allowing you to have that time off. He did it for us. And when I think of humble, that is something that constantly comes to my mind and I think about. And that's a good illustration for me to remember. But moving on, verses 4 through 8. And suddenly the Lord said to Moses and to Aaron and to Miriam, "Come out, you three, to the tent of meeting." And the three of them came out, and the Lord came down in a pillar of cloud and stood at the entrance of the tent and called Aaron and Miriam, and they both came forward. And that he said, "Hear my words. If there is a prophet among you, I, the Lord, make myself known to him in a vision. I speak with him in a dream, not so with my servant Moses. He is faithful in all my house. With him I speak mouth to mouth, clearly and not in riddles, and he beholds the form of the Lord. Why then were you not afraid to speak against my servant Moses?" Notice something here. Moses did not defend himself, nor did he rebuke Miriam and Aaron. And why is this? Is because a leader lets God take the lead and intervene. God intervened quickly. At this point, as a leader, many people would have had a rebuttal for the person speaking against them. Moses had the authority and could have easily called Miriam and Aaron down. He had the authority and he had the right to do that as their leader. He didn't. And it may have been possibly that he didn't get the chance, but he could have easily done it quick. But God intervened. But I truly believe that Moses did not do that because a leader lets God speak. God speaks and points out important facts to Miriam and Aaron that basically God lets them know, yes, I do work through other people, but Moses was given access to God in a way that no one else had. He had clear verbal communication, and Moses had also seen the form of God. If you've never read about that, I forget where it is in the Old Testament exactly, but Moses actually saw the back of God. Moses actually desired to see the face of God, and God told him, no, because if you see my face, you're going to die. But Moses saw the back of God. And God reminded the authority that he had given Moses. And remember, Moses was their appointed leader. Moses did not have to defend himself because God did. He didn't have to. He was not guilty of what Miriam and Aaron were bringing against him. And we see again, ultimately here, why even God intervened, is we see that to oppose Moses meant that you oppose God. Now, no one today has this relationship with God like Moses did. We can't see someone as this supreme authority because we had Jesus who came, who is our perfect leader, who is our perfect and supreme authority. But even with all that said, we must remember too that again, God does still place and appoint leaders today. Verses 9 and 10. And the anger of the Lord was kindled against them, and he departed. When the cloud removed over the tent, behold, Miriam was leprous like snow. And Aaron turned toward Miriam, and behold, she was leprous. So often we are quick to cast judgment on others because of the wrong that that person has done to me, to somebody else, whatever it may be. And a leader lets God judge. Sometimes, again, we are so quick to speak, but we need to let God speak into a problem. We jump and go before God. We don't seek Him. In Romans 2:1 it says, "Therefore you have no excuse, O man, every one of you who judges, for in passing judgment on another you condemn yourself, because you, the judge, practice the very same things." So, if someone judges someone else and you say, well, no, and you call them down and judge them, you've done exactly the same thing that they've done to someone else. And we need to be careful. We need to be wise. We need to have discernment before jumping into a situation. Also, James 4:12 says there is only one lawgiver and judge, ultimately God. So, a leader lets God be the judge. Verses 11 through 12, "And Aaron said to Moses, O my Lord, do not punish us because we have done foolishly and have sinned. Let her not be as one dead, whose flesh is half eaten away when he comes out of his mother's womb." We see here in these last four verses, God must punish sin because God takes sin seriously. God cannot be around sin. He cannot be present in sin because He's perfect. He's good. So the question is, why is Miriam the only one punished and not Aaron? I was kind of puzzled this myself as I was reading over it and thinking about it, but basically a lot of scholars and people believe that Miriam is the one punished because she was the main instigator. Now, if whatever we think is correct or not, this is God's judgment. God is the judge because God can ultimately see the intent and the heart of an individual. We can't. We can't judge that. Only God sees that. And there may have been something here that God knew, that God saw, that we as people could not see. And the thing is, we see that Aaron, once something happens, he kind of freaks out, but says, "Oh no, God, we've done wrong. Please don't punish us." And many times, we don't realize our wrong until we get in trouble. We are perfectly fine with doing what we think is okay until it is too late. I remember as a kid, sometimes that would happen, and I would get in trouble, and I wouldn't want the punishment that my parents gave me. And sometimes they would extend grace, but for me to really understand, I had to be punished, to not do something again. And I think, again, we need to think. We really need to think before we act on things. We really need to pray. We need to have discernment. We need to have understanding before we jump right into something and really pray to God and ask, is this something I need to be doing? Seek His guidance. Again, let God speak into a situation. Finishing off with the last verses. Verse 13, "And Moses cried to the Lord, O God, please heal her. Please. But the Lord said to Moses, if her father had but spit in her face, should she not be shamed 7 days? Let her be shut outside the camp 7 days, and after that she may be brought in again. So Miriam was shut outside the camp 7 days, and the people did not set out on the march till Miriam was brought in again. After that, the people set out from Hazeroth and camped in the wilderness of Paran." I think there's some really interesting things here, especially as a leader, what we must realize and what we must see. Moses acts and responds in a way that is completely unexpected and is countercultural to how the world thinks today. I've been very heartbroken by things that have happened over the past few weeks. No matter what side you are on, there has been loss of life. And the fact that whoever it is, whether it's the shootings in Orlando, in Dallas, Baton Rouge, whatever it is. The fact that someone could have died without knowing Jesus Christ. And the fact that they could be spending eternity in hell separated from God is a sad thing. Because we are all created in the image of God. We bear His image. So Moses acts in a way that's unexpected. In the world today, we're seeing people respond in ways that are wrong. Both sides. And we have to understand that. We have to see that. But as Christians, what are we supposed to do? Moses responds in a way that would completely puzzle anyone today, even if it happened to us individually. Moses intercedes for the person who would be identified as his enemy. Moses intercedes for the one that is his opposition, no matter if it is his sister or anyone else. He intercedes for Miriam, even though she was undeserving of it. And again, well, here it is. A leader is an intercessor. Many leaders in this case would have probably said something like, "You got what you deserved. You got what was coming to you." A leader may not even care and just go on with their life. But we see Moses did not. And this is not the first time Moses did something like this. Remember, Moses is humble. We're seeing his character. There are many different times where Moses intercedes, and especially for the nation of Israel. It's a common theme that we see throughout the lifetime of Moses. There was a time after the nation of Israel received the Ten Commandments, and it was after they had built their false calf, this idol, this image. But when God was getting ready to send them into the promised land, they had grumbled, they had struggled, they had completely turned their back on God, and God basically told Moses, He said, "I'm going to remove my cloud during the day. I'm going to take this pillar of fire and take it away. My presence will no longer be with you, because if I go into the land of the promise with you, I'm going to kill somebody." Because God was angry. God was upset. He was ready to do away with His people, and that was all the time. Well, not all the time, but many times. But what did Moses do? He came before the Lord and said, "God, please don't take your presence from us, because people identify us and they see us because of your presence. Please come with us. Please forgive us." And God decided to keep His presence with them. But in chapter 14 of Numbers, shortly following Numbers 12, after the spies were sent into Canaan, into the promised land, of course, if you know this story, the spies come back, and out of the 12 that went, 10 of them said, "No, we can't go." And 2 of them said, "Yes, we can." And the people sided with the 10. They sided with the majority, which was wrong. And what did God do? He was ready to kill them once again. He said, "I will kill all of them. I'll save Joshua and Caleb. Moses, you're going to be fine. I'll make you a great nation, and you'll go into the promised land." And Moses once again interceded for his people. People that had ultimately defied the authority of God, but also questioned His leadership. And what did God do? God forgave them, but said, "You know what? I must punish sin." He said, anyone over the age, if it was 40, must die. They're not going to enter into the land of Canaan. But He allowed them to live. There's some people that say, "You know what? God is this great judge. He doesn't have any grace." Well, I would point you back to the beginning, to Adam and Eve. God said that if you were to eat the fruit of this tree, you would die. What happened? God allowed them to live. Yes, they eventually died, but God allowed them to live. That is grace. Undeserved grace. So Moses intervened. Moses looked past the faults of people and saw them as God's creation. People corrupted by sin. And He chose to pray and intercede for them on their behalf. This is true humility an amazing character. Moses prayed for Miriam's deepest need at that moment. She needed to be healed. Now, ultimately, Miriam was healed up from her affliction, but she had to deal with it. She had to be leprous, which during that time, it wasn't necessarily leprosy. This term that was used here was used for many different diseases, but whatever it was, she had to deal with it for 7 days. But again, God extended grace because he only allowed her to deal with it for 7 days, where she could have had it the rest of her life. But God had to punish sin. Miriam had to be disciplined. But after seeing humility and seeing Moses as an intercessor, we see something even greater, an image pointing to that of Christ. Jesus, who is our great high priest, who intercedes for us on our behalf and pleads our case before the throne of God. Jesus does this for us, but he not only interceded for us or intercedes for us, he paid the price of our sin. We don't have to suffer the punishment of sin because Jesus died for us in our place on the cross and took our sin upon himself. And he has victory over sin because he resurrected and came back to life. And all we have to do is believe in him, repent of our sin, and accept his forgiveness. Just as Miriam needed to be healed and cleansed, so do we, but we need to be healed from sin. Sin is the reason why the world is fallen and broken. We need to come humbly before the throne of God and repent of sin and get right with God. So, how are we supposed to respond? What are we supposed to do? And in closing, I give these couple of statements. And then I'm going to give a story. Maybe today you have never entered into a personal relationship with Jesus. You can do that today. Maybe there's been areas of your life where you have not tried God's leadership. Maybe you have been too quick to judge someone in the past and may have not extended grace. You may have conflict going on in your life and you need God to speak into it. There may be an area in your life where you need to practice humility. And one of the most important things, there may be someone in your life that you need to pray for. Someone who, by your understanding, is undeserving of forgiveness, who has wronged you, wronged someone else, someone who you need to make it right with. And there may be someone that you know that you need to pray for and that they would experience Jesus. And as I close with this last story, I had a friend that heard this similar story at that camp that first summer. And he came up to me later that night after hearing a message similar to this. And he came up to me and said, "Stephen, you don't know this, but for some reason I don't like you." It's really weird to have someone say that. He's like, "I don't know what the issue is, but after hearing this tonight, I know that I need to get right with you. You don't know what the issue is. You don't know that I have a problem with you, but I need to get right with you." Because he heard about this, praying for someone, getting right with someone, and ultimately leading with humility. That was humility. Leading with humility, allowing God to judge, letting God speak into a situation. And that may be some things that we need to allow to happen today in our world. Allow God to do in our life. Allow God to have control. Amen. Let's pray. God, I thank you for our time today. I thank you for the great example of Moses, God, and how you appointed him as the leader of the nation of Israel.